Reluctantly, Churchill canceled the project. Geoffrey Pike's grand vision of an ice ship was shattered. Today, the remnants of the prototype sit at the bottom of Patricia Lake, an object of curiosity for local scuba divers. And for those who know the story of the Habakkuk, a reminder of what might have been. The Habakkuk was destined not to play a part in the Allied offensive against Nazi Germany, but many more weird weapons would. In 1944, they were primed to spearhead the largest invasion in history. June 1944. An enormous force was amassing in England in preparation for the biggest military operation in history, the invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe. Under the command of General Eisenhower, American and British troops had been planning every detail of the operation for months. Armored tanks were to play a vital role. If the tanks could spearhead the beach landings, it would give the Allies a huge advantage. Conventional thinking was to cross the sea in a landing craft, but surprise was to be a vital part of the D-Day plan. The answer? Build tanks that could swim. The American Army had been looking at ways to get tanks to move through water since World War I. The results were not always promising. One tank that could swim was the duplex drive. It was an adapted Sherman M4 developed at the U.S. Army's Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland and tested in the Chesapeake Bay. This is one of the few survivors.
This is a tank, the type that would have been used at D-Day, and as you come down the vehicle right here, you'll see that canvas was put right in here, and this was sealed. It had a covering here, and you can still see the remnants of the canvas that's right here. And this canvas would have come up onto this superstructure, and this superstructure would have been erected, and it would come up and over the top of the vehicle. And by having that canvas there, you displaced enough water to where it was buoyant.
The tank was powered by two propellers which ran off the main engine. Its top speed was 4 knots. It could swim well enough in the calm waters of the Chesapeake Bay. But on D-Day itself, they had mixed fortunes. Of 32 tanks launched into the sea off Omaha Beach, just 6 made it to the shore.
There was a cross current, the tide was coming in, and it swamped those vehicles, and they just couldn't get them into the beach.
But many, launched onto the beaches in other parts of Normandy, did make it. Nazi gunners, thinking they were weird boats, left them alone until it was too late. Several other specially adapted tanks kept up the momentum of the invasion. This flamethrower could incinerate a German pillbox in seconds. A rhinoceros tank cut through thick hedgerows like a knife through butter. But most successful of all were the flail tanks. The flail tank was designed to clear a path through minefields. Each tank had a mechanical rotor built on the front. Attached to the rotor were 6-foot chains with fist-sized balls to detonate the mines. Ian Hamilton commanded a flail tank on D-Day.
There is a sort of heavy thump from an ordinary telemine or a shoe mine, and the tank does a little bounce.
Not only did these bizarre-looking tanks blow up mines, they often terrified Nazi soldiers into surrender.
If you saw this apparition coming towards you with these strange whirling bits throwing up a huge cloud of dust, I would be inclined to get up and run myself.
But not every weird weapon was a success. In the months before D-Day, the Nazis were steadily reinforcing their defenses. To breach this massive wall, the British Navy's Department of Miscellaneous Weapons Development built an extraordinary thing called a panjandrum.
That panjandrum was, I think, the only thing that we ever were associated with that could be described as a nonsense.
The Panjandrum was supposed to be the first weapon to hit the beaches on D-Day. It was to charge out of a landing craft, rush across the beach, and explode when it reached its target. Trouble was, it never quite got there. It consisted of 2 wheels and a drum filled with a ton of explosives. 18 cordite rockets mounted on the wheels provided the propulsion, but the problem was they couldn't make it go straight.
It was quite a frightening sight because it would be going at a fast speed and you would not know whether it was going to hit you or not if you were watching it from anywhere.
To compensate, they added more rockets and fitted a 3rd wheel. And still it didn't work. Although a stray rocket provided an interesting diversion for a curious dog. After a year of tests, the Panjandrum finally reached the point of no return.
It ran at a collection of staff officers who'd come down to watch it. And it stared off at them, and they all fell over into a dike. When that happened, I think they rather changed their minds.
The Panjandrum cost hundreds of thousands of pounds before the British Navy finally admitted defeat.
Yes, it appeared to be a daft thing, but the urgency and desperation behind it has to be borne in mind.
But the same urgency and desperation was also producing astonishing and inventive ideas. In America, a Pennsylvania dentist was hatching a plan to destroy Japan's industrial base. Using bats? When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, their forces seemed invincible. Never before had Americans felt so threatened. From across the nation, President Franklin D. Roosevelt was inundated with novel ideas and offers of help. Some were very unusual indeed. Throughout the history of warfare, all kinds of animals have been used, and in 1942, a new species was added to the list: bats. The idea sounds simple. Take 1 million bats, attach an incendiary bomb into each one, release them over Japan, and watch the massive conflagration and destruction of a city.
The reaction of people who hear my story of the bat bomb is, what? The inference being, this guy is trying to pull my leg, you know?
A leg pull it was not. But it seemed a crazy way to fight a war, especially to those invited to work on the program. One was a 17-year-old biology student called Jack Cooper.
One afternoon, I was in the lab, and this Santa Claus kind of looking man with sparkling eyes and rosy cheeks came into the lab and told about his idea of using bats to carry incendiary bombs into Japanese cities. Crazy idea.
The man with rosy cheeks was Doc Little Adams, a Pennsylvania dentist with a flair for inventions. There were 4 reasons why Adams thought this extraordinary idea might work. Bats can carry their young, sometimes 2 or 3 of them, suggesting they would be strong enough to carry a small bomb. They can be induced to hibernate, which meant they could easily be handled. During daylight hours, they seek out darkness, roofs and attics, cracks and crevices in which to roost. Above all, there were millions and millions of them freely available in bat caves across America. Doc Adams' theories were sound, but to progress the idea, he needed to persuade the government to provide the money and personnel. Not an easy task for a dentist with no military experience.